Hey guys, it's Tanner Smith with Special Education Interviews, EDL 853, Module 3. With the first topic, child find procedures, my administrator and paraprofessional both did not mention having a ton of experience when it came to this. I found this a little alarming with my principal because being the administrator in the junior high school, I feel like he should have at least some knowledge of what some of our screening procedures are. To be honest, I did not know what our screening procedures are before this, and I still don't know exactly what they are, but our special education teacher communicated this pretty well with me. She mentioned that it all starts with teachers and parents. If they have any concerns, they'll bring that to an administrator or special education teacher. And then from there, they'll begin with observations in the classroom with the students and collect data on that. And then from there, they'll analyze that data and then determine if that student needs testing to determine if any accommodations need to be made or an IEP needs to be made. Next, what is the most challenging part of their role in special education? My administrator answered some of these questions with his experience as a special education teacher in the past. He was a special ed teacher for 2 years, so some of his answers will reflect his experience as a special education teacher and as a principal. But he mentioned what he found challenging was effectively handling the different levels of achievement where students are at, and then creating plans to help each of those students be successful depending on what level they were. Then the special education teacher mentioned making sure other educators are doing their job or making sure their duties are being done in regards to helping the students with special needs in their classes. And then for her personally, it's meeting all the needs of the students and parents. I know, depending on the caseload, that can be quite the challenge. A special education teacher has quite the job. She also mentioned a never-ending paperwork. That is quite the challenge for her. It seems to always be there. Emotional stress, I know it can play a big part, especially if some of the students come from a rough background. I know here in Chase County, a few of our special needs students do come from a pretty rough background, and I know that she deals with that on a daily basis. And then 2 more things she mentioned was not taking things personal, and that's in reference to sometimes students get a little angry and they might lash out at her, and it may not be something she's done, but she might have triggered them, and she struggles not taking some of those things personal. And then also, she likes to find quick fixes or instant fixes that she thinks can help a student, and sometimes when those don't work, she struggles with that. As far as the paraprofessional goes, she mentioned knowing when to step in and when to step back as the most challenging part of her job. And I can understand that. I think a para walks a fine line of knowing when to help and when to step back, and maybe sometimes they think that they're helping too much and the student's really not pushing themselves. And then sometimes they may be stepping back too much and not providing the necessary help that student needs. So I can understand how that can be a challenge. The most rewarding part of their job. The administrator mentioned seeing the positive connection between the students and staff members, and that's gen ed teachers and special ed teachers. He really enjoys seeing the positive connections made between students and teachers. And seeing those teachers having a positive influence on those students. Special education teacher mentioned, and also the paraprofessional mentioned, small gains or small student success after working so hard at some things, especially if they're working on a new concept, let's say in math, and they've been working on it in the special ed room for weeks. And all of a sudden that student, it finally clicks. Seeing those small gains is super rewarding to the special ed teacher and also the paraprofessional. The paraprofessional also mentioned just having the opportunity to assist the students and being able to help them grow. She really enjoys being with them and being part of their lives and being part of their education to help them. The advice they have in regards to supervision of special ed staff, my administrator mentioned allowing them to do their thing. And he's pretty hands-off as it is. Even in the gen ed classrooms, you won't see him around very often, coming in and out. and I think he's pretty hands-off with the special ed department as well. I've been on a handful of IEP meetings, and I've not seen him in there one time. So that's probably something that I'm learning not to do. I understand that a principal needs to be seen and needs to be involved as much as possible in all aspects of the school. But he also mentioned asking questions when needed, and emphasized learning about special ed law and procedures, and then also getting to know special ed staff. Special ed teacher mentioned making sure the special educator and the administrator had an open line of communication. I'm not sure that's something that is always practiced at our school. I think she appreciates when he is available to communicate and supports her in what she might need. But I thought that was a pretty interesting perspective she gave. Then her experience is unique because our district actually employs a special education coordinator who is in charge of the pairs that come from a cooperative, a town a little bit further away from us. So our special ed teacher doesn't actually have, or she does, I shouldn't say doesn't have to, she does watch our pairs and supervises them, but that's not specifically in her job title. We have another person hired who manages all the staff. And the paraprofessional really just wants a clear understanding of what expectations are, and I think that's mainly from the principal role. I think there's some confusion at times with what is being expected, or what is expected and what's being done, because there's a lack of communication between the two. Next is, how do you work effectively with parents of special needs children? And all three of them mentioned communication. All members included need to effectively communicate with parents, is what my administrator mentioned. It's not just one of their jobs, it's all of their jobs to be communicating with the parents as much as needed. Special education teacher also mentioned communicate as much as possible. And then she really hit on forming the positive connection with the parents. Relationships are big with her, and being able to form a positive relationship makes it easier to communicate, and especially when everyone realizes and understands that, the special education teacher wants the best for the kid, the parents want what's best for the kid, and they're all there to make decisions that will benefit the child. The paraprofessional also mentioned communication and understanding that parents want what is best for the kids. She kind of mentioned that with, in comparison with the special ed teacher, just making sure that everyone has the same understanding. And sometimes parents can be overprotective, but what we need to remember as professionals is they just want what's best for their kid, and we need to help explain what is being done to benefit their child and help them achieve success. How do you work with regular ed teachers and students with special needs? My principal mentioned helping ensure implementation plans are effective, and also making sure that special ed plans are being followed. I think that would be in regards to supervising and being involved with the IEP meetings and with the special education teacher. She mentioned let teachers know that she is there to help modify and adapt test assignments in whatever way they can. She tries to communicate with regular teachers on a weekly basis. She does a pretty good job with this, and then making sure whatever accommodations are implemented aren't taking too much away from what the educators are trying to teach. They don't want to, they don't want to make things too easy, where it's really taking away from the teaching process from the teacher to the student. And then paraprofessionals, clear communication with regular teacher. I think that's something that sometimes lacks. The expectations aren't communicated well between regular ed teachers and pairs all the time, and I think an open line of communication between those two would really make things much smoother when it comes to educating the special needs students in those classes who are included in those classes. She mentioned how collaboration is important, and the teachers that she does collaborate with, it's pretty beneficial to those students. Next, what advice do they have for a first-year administrator? My principal mentioned listen and learning, and being willing to lead, but also lend support. And you'll find that the from here on out, that's kind of a common theme with the special educator and the principal and the paraprofessionals: communication and support. He also mentioned consulting with special ed staff regularly. Like we mentioned earlier, communication is huge in this. Special ed teacher mentioned communication support is a must, and being aware that sometimes the principal or administrator may not be needed in the special ed setting, and then all of a sudden be required. Their time might be needed every single day for a long time. And that's something that kind of popped out to me when she was mentioning that, how busy it can be for an administrator. And then she mentioned being on the same page as staff and with the students as well. Students need to know expectations, staff need to know expectations, and they need to be held accountable to those expectations. And the paraprofessional really would like to see the administration or administrator be involved with the special needs students and then stay current with what is needed for each of them to succeed, and not to micromanage. And I think both the special ed teacher and some of our paras would like to see our administrator a little more involved than what he is, and that's something I'm taking away from this assignment in these interviews. How do they describe the role of special ed teacher and the building principal? Collaboration is huge in this. Administrator mentioned both should work together and understand the bigger picture, and it's for the students, and what really should be driving the decisions is the special needs students and the needs of those students. And regular consultation with each other. Special ed teacher mentioned collaboration, communication, especially with staff and students, and then working together to implement effective plans for special needs students is huge. And I think we come back to how the administrator needs to be involved as much as possible in the special ed setting, as well as the gen ed setting. And then the paraprofessional mentioned they share similar responsibilities in regards to special ed, but at times the principal focuses on the entire student body, or can sometimes focus away from special ed setting, and the special ed teacher is full-time on the special or the needs of the special needs students. What characteristics do you seek in aspiring administrators with regards to special education? My administrator mentioned having a good working knowledge of special education procedures and law. He mentioned that in one of his earlier comments. And then also the characteristic he seeks in aspiring administrators is empathy, and to be an inclusive problem solver, taking in what everyone's saying, all the information possible, and then making the best decision based on what the student needs. The special educator mentioned being helpful, a good communicator, and being supportive. And you'll see in my conclusion that's kind of really what it breaks down to. My paraprofessional mentioned being understanding. I know there's a ton of patience that goes along with educating special needs students. And then being able to acknowledge and act on the different needs of students. Once again, that's being involved with the special education setting and knowing the students in there and what those needs are. From these interviews, I find my role as a future administrator really being one that establishes a collaborative environment. I need to work with gen ed teachers, I need to work with special education teachers and paras, everyone. I need to be involved with those IEP meetings and be involved with those students. So I have a good understanding of what is needed for them to be successful in my school. And then constant open communication with all staff members and parents. That's huge. I think you need to develop that communication, once again, to benefit the student, and then provide the necessary support for student, staff, parents as needed. That's my job as the building principal, is to provide everyone, all stakeholders, with the tools they need to be successful. And then, of course, gaining a good knowledge of the special education laws, procedures, and I have to make the decisions with my students in mind. That really needs to be what drives all my decisions. I really enjoyed interviewing my principal, special ed teacher, and my para. I kind of learned quite a bit, and I realized there's a ton that goes into this, and I'm observing what's not being done right now, and I'm observing a few things that are done well, and I'm learning a lot. So thanks. That's all I've got.